session. Without any further ado, it is an absolute pleasure to introduce Will Palmer, who is a proven performer in niche industries. I was having a good chat to Will before the session this morning, and I think Will is just such the personification of a Kiwi who is punching so high, and it's people we don't really hear about, you know, through mainstream news. How do you turn a brilliant idea, ripe for the plucking, into a successful enterprise? How do you move first and fast? And once you've recognised an opportunity, how do you go about executing it? Well, Will has walked the talk with great success across a variety of startups: HRV, Connect Now, Warmo, and his latest venture, which is particularly exciting and quite staggering, Movio, which has grown rapidly to become a world leader in marketing data analysis and management of theatrical distributors and exhibitors. In fact, Movio has been engaged by 25,000 screens around the world. Please welcome Will Palmer.
Thank you. Thanks for that introduction. Is that on? It's going? Good. It's going to be pretty freestyle today. I'm just going to run through our story and a few sort of highlights of things that we learned along the way and mistakes that we made. I thought I'd just start off, though. I haven't got a lot of presentation to do, but just to sort of explain who we are. We don't have a very large profile in New Zealand, and 99.5% of our business is offshore, so to build our profile here hasn't been hugely advantageous. So it might be advantageous to sort of explain a little bit about who we are. So Movio knows the who. So there's lots of data out there that tells you what the box office gross is at a film. You'll see it all the time. This film did $100 million. This film passed $1 billion. Finding Dory just passed $1 billion. And they all talk about these revenue numbers all the time. Unbeknownst to most people is that the studios have absolutely no idea who it is who actually goes to movies. And there's a fundamental reason for that, which is that the exhibitors, which are the cinemas themselves, have the direct relationship with the consumer, and the distributor and the studio makes the content, and the two of them don't communicate very well together. So the distributor makes all the content and does all the marketing, but has no access to the end consumer and has no idea who it is. And the exhibitors primarily are just real estate companies that happen to be showing movies, so they don't really care who their customer is. I'm being a little bit flippant, but that's sort of how it works. So there's been this huge hole in this industry of trying to understand who it is who actually goes to movies. And it's a huge problem for studios because they are some of the largest advertisers on earth. 3 of the world's top 10 advertisers are film studios. So you're talking about billions of dollars in media and marketing spend. And it's done in a very unique way in that if you think about a movie, nobody knows anything about it before it comes out. It's got this huge flood of advertising and marketing that's spread across all different channels a few weeks before the film releases. And then 2 weeks later, it's out of the theatre unless it's a big film. And it's gone. And then they start that process again when they launch it on VOD to a slightly lesser degree or on DVD, and then that sort of moves out of the way. There's no other product in the world where this crazy phenomenon occurs, where you've just got to launch these unknown products with so much fanfare so quickly. And so to understand who that audience is and to target market customers more efficiently, it's a multi-billion-dollar opportunity. So just a little bit about Movio. So we have 3 divisions to Movio. The first one is Movieo Cinema. So this is a product that sits over the top of a cinema chain's infrastructure. It pulls through all of their loyalty data, all of their web data, all of their links and clicks from their email applications, every interaction that occurs with a customer. It profiles it, analyzes it, and then serves it back to the cinema themselves so they understand their own audience. So each individual cinema has their own individual instance of Movieo Cinema. They use that for targeted marketing, they use that for programming, they use that for running their email campaigns, they use it for driving a lot of their acquisitions. It's really just market data for them to understand their own businesses. Movio Media is the latest addition to the Movio group of product offerings. And Movio Media was always our end goal, and this is where we aggregate all of the cinema data from all of our Movio Cinema customers into our parent product, and we use that with distribution and studios to help them understand the audience of the film that we're about to create. Is there an audience for this film at all? Should we make this film? Should we go with this actor or that actor? Which one's trending? Which one's got the highest customer following? Should we market this way or that way? Should we release it on this date or that date? How many screens should we book for this film? And which channels should we use to market it? So all of those things are solved solved by Movio Media, which is largely a research type, database type product. And then we have an area which we call Movio Experts, which is where we have a team of doctorate data scientists and a team of industry experts that basically look at all the information we have and pull out the insights to make it usable. And I think a lot of us have heard the term big data banded around, but a lot of people who are in big data will tell you, what the hell is it useful for? Most of us have no idea how you actually use big data. And so what the experts do is say, we've got all this data, now we can find the interesting pieces out of it and help you exploit or utilize that piece of information. So they are our three sort of key divisions. To let you know where we are right now, we have 28% global market share in our key market. So we've done that in just under 6 years. We have 26,000 screens that actually use our software, so it's a pretty big chunk. We measure our business on active member profiles. So this is a number of individual cinema goers that we have a full profile on that transact regularly at a cinema. And we have actually now over 37 million active moviegoers. We have actually over 110 million individuals profiled, but a lot of those people are dormant users or viewers of cinema. And as an email engine, we're unsure of whether we can quantify this yet, but we believe we may be the largest email send provider in New Zealand. We run our own email business. It's all our own internal company. We're sending about 150 million emails a month. So, and they're all targeted. So this is not sort of scatter. They're all personalised and targeted to a person's profile. We're certainly one of the larger email providers in this marketplace. Just a little bit of insight as to where we are. So the US is our big market. We have about a 54% market share in the US, and we're growing quickly in EMEA. We're at about a 400% growth rate in the European region. So that area will all be very coloured soon. We're just on a JV deal in Asia with a subsidiary of WeChat. Have you guys heard of WeChat? WeChat are like Twitter and Facebook for Asia put together. They have 1.2 billion users or some crazy number. So we've just done a JV where they've bought 60% of our China business. So we expect that area to grow a lot. We have about 89% market share in Asia. And our Movio Media product works with the companies like 20th Century Fox, Lionsgate, Paramount, Sony, Universal, Warner Brothers. Pretty much all of the major studios use Movio in some way. And a couple of years ago, if you follow the stock exchange, a couple of years ago, we partnered with Vista Entertainment Solutions and took the two businesses public under the company Vista Group. We floated and since then have been one of the highest performing stocks on the stock exchange. Today our market cap's somewhere around $500 million. Movio's valuation, and that's somewhere around $150 million of it. So it makes up a pretty large chunk. We have made a number of acquisitions with the funds that we raised in the cinema sector, and in fact there's even more than that on that screen now. So we have businesses that we've acquired in the Netherlands, Romania, the UK, US, and a number of other places. So that's enough about the intro. Now let's talk about how we got to where that was. And so I'm just going to run you through sort of a little bit of a story about what it is that we did and where we began, and sort of, I guess, where we're going and what we learnt. So we started out by selling coupon cards. Well, I started out by selling coupon cards back about 20 years ago, which makes you sound really old. And we were doing them in Christchurch even. We had the Palms, the cinema chain and the Palms. I think it was a Reading cinema at the time. Not sure it still is. Still is a Reading cinema. We would go out and we would have a team of door-to-door salesmen, or we'd have people set up at the university campuses. We'd sell these coupon cards. They'd be like $30. You'd get discounts on your movies for the next 6 months and free popcorns and all sorts of weird things. And it was a really successful business. We managed to expand it to Australia and New Zealand. We were selling about 150,000 of these cards a year, and we were clearing about $10 profit per card. So it was a really, back then, a really lucrative and exciting, license to print money, basically. And then one day, a whole change happened across the whole sector of coupons, etc. It was all about loyalty. And if you didn't have data, then it was no longer relevant. And so all of these young marketing people came in at all the cinema chains and said, you guys are out, we're going to do loyalty programs and we're going to capture the data and we're going to stop just giving away coupons to people. And that was the end of that lovely little business that we had. But it did sort of spark our interest that could we combine the loyalty programs or the coupon type option and start collecting data as well. And that was sort of I suppose, the first thought we had around this idea. I wasn't capable as a technologist. I was a pretty good salesman, but not a very good technologist. And I had a guy walk through my door one day and say, look, we've got this new startup we've set up. It's called Movie Shack, which is now Fatso. Have you guys seen Fatso before? And they said, look, what we do is we have a subscription model for DVDs, and you know, we'd love somebody to sell it for us and set up a team to sell it. And I thought, that sounds interesting. So they basically built a replica of Netflix in their garage, is effectively what they'd done. But it was better than Netflix. And the reason it was better is because they had put a recommendations engine in that recommended content to people. I know you're going, yeah, everything's got a recommendation engine. This was 2003. Amazon didn't even have a recommendation engine in 2003. So they had a recommendation engine. I was like, wow, that's pretty cool. And it recommended content based around its value. So it wasn't just whether it was the right content for you, but also what price they could buy it for. And that had another element to it, and I thought this was incredible. So they were able to recommend films to people that they could buy at the right price because new releases were too expensive. And I looked at that and went, look, I don't really not that interested in a subscription DVD business, but I had this cinema thing I used to do a few years ago, and if we put those two things together, this could be really cool. So we both went our own way for a while. I helped them get that off the ground. They sold that out to Sky TV. And when that happened, we came together and we set up a business called Uno. And Uno was Groupon. Effectively, but before Groupon existed, and it was a bit premature. And we went out there, basically gave all our customers that we sold them like this plastic card, and you could load offers onto this plastic card for movies and cinemas, and Pizza Hut and all these different places. But the only one that seemed to work with the consumer was the cinema one. And so we decided to can all other things that we were doing and focus on the cinema sector. And Barclay Cinema in Auckland was our first big customer. And what we did is we built a loyalty solution. So we sat over the top of their point of sale. We built the card system that enabled somebody to swipe a card at the loyalty and acquire points. We started capturing data and we ran it ourselves. So it wasn't a product our customers ran, we ran it like a service. And what we started to do was take this data, analyze it, and run targeted campaigns. So we started, trying lots of different things. Like, does a $1 off a popcorn have more benefit than doing a competition? Does, doing a 2 for the 1 on a really popular film better than doing a $5 discount? We just tried every permutation of campaign you could try, and the client let us do whatever we wanted because the way we were paid was on ROI. So we got paid a percentage of the uplift we were able to achieve. So it was in our interest to make sure that these campaigns were profitable. And within 18 months, we had a situation where we were making a ton of money. It was doing brilliantly, but it was no way it could scale. It was entirely a service business, but it was doing very well. So well that Hoyts came along and bought Barclay. They had a big system they already had that they wanted to roll out, and our system was thrown out. So we'd sort of had this brief moment of success, call it a bit of R&D, but we didn't have much after that. We were lucky, though, because I wrote this term into the agreement that they didn't read, which we owned the data. And so they wanted that data, so they had to pay me lots of money for it. And because they'd thrown us out, I didn't feel very good about giving them a good price, so I took a ton of money off the table. And the reason I bring that up is it was a luxurious moment because it gave us time to think about what to do next. We weren't in a rush. We didn't have to throw the business away because we had no customer. We had this little window of time to do some real R&D and try and work out what is it we actually learned? Where are we right now? And what could we do with this IP that we've created? Because we know we had something. We just don't know what it was. So if I take a little pause, we had a mildly successful service business, but we couldn't scale because it was very service orientated and we had no clients. We were competing against some very large software companies. One of them was a New Zealand company called Vista in the loyalty space. We had no prospects, but we had worked out a formula which was that if you capture data, analyze it, target a customer and measure whether it works, you can build a very, very lucrative marketing solution. So that was the piece that we knew was the good bit. So we had this epiphany. Instead of trying to sell this to cinemas where there is no money, where is all the money in the film sector? And we think it's the studios. The studios have all the money and they're spending all the money on marketing. What we should do is build a product that is going to allow a studio to be able to communicate directly with the end consumer. That was the real goal of the whole thing. So if we could capture all of this cinema data, profile and analyze it, but instead of giving it to a cinema to do something with, we go to the marketing departments of the big studios and provide a direct access into these customers, we could be rich. This is going to be great. And so that was the plan. So we repurposed our product. We walked out the door and started trying to sell it, and none of the cinemas would take it because they thought we were going to give away their data and all sorts of things. We even tried to give them the software and couldn't make it work. So hence we ended up building a cinema solution first, spending 5 years selling that in, and then building our media solution and doing it a lot slower than we wanted to do. But that was the whole idea still has remained the same, and it's still the original vision that we stuck to when we launched Movio, which was the idea of being able to take the content that a studio is creating directly to the end consumer. That was always what it was about. So we did a bit of research on this, and we realised that this market was huge. Just in Australia alone, they were spending $180 million a year on marketing films back at that point in time. And we sort of thought to ourselves, well, if we could take 10% of that in a direct marketing type fee, that's an $18 million company, that would be really exciting. And that was sort of the catalyst that sort of got us going. Before we could do too much, though, we needed to get a perfect partner. And so we just so happens about 400 metres from where we were working was a company called Vista Entertainment Solutions, which are now obviously our partners in the Vista group. And we approached them about partnering up, and we did a deal where they continued to sell their own loyalty product. We focused on analytics and campaigns and marketing. They put in some cash, a very small amount, and opened up the doors to their existing customer base. And so they took a small investment in the company and gave us full rein to go do what we wanted to do. That worked really well, but I suppose at that point that was where we could say Movio was born, and that was December 2010. So that was the sort of the start of what went on. We moved from a service business to a software as a service option. We moved from a service company to a product company. And we focused on clients that had pre-existing databases that they weren't doing anything with, rather than trying to create them ourselves. And those changes sort of led to the very quick growth. So we started out by selling in the New Zealand and Australia market. We quickly sold the event chain and the Hoyts chain. We got to about 80% market share in that region very quickly. And it was very clear that we had something that was quite special, but we didn't know how special. So we decided we were going to head up to the US and see if we could make the product even bigger. We didn't have any money, so we flew into LA. We tried to work out where the biggest trade show was. It was in Las Vegas, a thing called CinemaCon. We couldn't afford a trade booth. It was too expensive for us. I had this theory that CEOs don't hang out on trade floors. I don't know how many of you people have been to trade shows before or had to sit behind the counter of a trade show before, but it's a demoralising and a horrendous event in my view. So I didn't want to do it anyway, so I was trying to find many excuses I could not to sit behind a trade stand. But I did think that studio heads and exhibitors would come to a nice suite if I leased a suite. So I didn't even register for the conference. I got a suite above the conference, and I used my networks that I'd already created in Australia to try and get as many meetings with the US exhibitors as I possibly could. I managed to secure 17 meetings for that week. 16 of them wanted to proceed. And so I knew straight away I needed to move to the US, and things were going to get big pretty quick. So it was obviously a pretty exciting moment. Around the same time, we were looking at what else we could do with this wonderful idea we have, which was the idea of taking data, analysing it, profiling it, using it to do targeted marketing, and then measuring, at the sales channel, did it actually work? And then using that as a cycle that kept going. Basically a closed loop direct marketing cycle. And we thought, this is a product that more than cinema could use. And the logical place, out of a chance meeting, the logical place to use this was probably the airline industry. And I was sitting at a charity fundraising event. I happened to be sitting next to the now CEO of Air New Zealand, Christopher Luxton. And he said, look, I was telling what we did with movies, and he said, we need something like that as well. We've got 4 different databases around the world. We need to aggregate them together, and our databases aren't connected to the way that we do our email marketing, and we send all these emails, and all you guys are probably Koru members. You've probably all got ridiculous emails that don't fit your profile all the time, and so there was this big opportunity. So we started looking at creating a sub-brand called Porto or something like that. And we were going to take all our Movio software and build this airline product. And we spent about 6 months prototyping it. We had the deal done with Air New Zealand. We had the Argentinian company also, and the Chilean airline also wanting to do it as well. So we had this sort of global opportunity evolving. And then one day I had this sort of moment of realization that my cinema thing that I was really good at was going nowhere. It was falling over. It wasn't progressing. We were starting to water down this really unique offering we had. We were starting to open the door to competitors. And I just woke up one day and said, we've got to can everything else we're doing. We're going to be a cinema-only company. And it was a really tough thing to do. Like, I'm sure you guys have all been in a situation before where you've found yourself saying yes to a whole bunch of deals that probably aren't the best for your long-term future, but you do it anyway. Because you want the revenue, or, the opportunity feels too big at the time. And for me, Air New Zealand were like a childhood dream to work for Air New Zealand. And to turn around and actually say, no, I don't want to do it, I'm not going to do it, was a really, really tough call. But I think that moment where we made that focus on the theatrical business, which is a really small niche in global scales, but a big niche for a New Zealand company, was the moment where we became a successful business, when we really honed in our offering and we didn't water it down, and we didn't have to water down our marketing, we didn't have to water down our story, we didn't have to have a neutral brand. We were able to really focus and get it right, was when things really took off for us. So we canned that airport business. After a wee while there, we then looked at how we were going to scale the business and what was going to go on from there. And we built a lot of systems around the world to get things scaling. I think one of the things that we did that was really successful was templated our regional office model. So we looked at trying to create a model where if we build one country, the next country would look exactly the same. And that sort of allowed us to sort of replicate what we were doing very quickly. We used that same trade show model I talked about when we went into Europe and into China, where we didn't work on the trade show. We used the idea of a suite. We created a destination where CEOs wanted to come, not the ground level staff. And that sort of strategy we just replicated to get to a reasonable point. If we fast forward to the Movio media piece, this is sort of where we think is the future of Movio. So Movio is now at about a 12 million annual recurring revenue. We think that by 2021 we'll be at $100 million, and that is a slice of the studio revenue that comes out of the industry. But the play for us from here is really to take all of this information that we've been able to garner in each territory, and when we reach a critical mass in each territory, take all this data, all this information, aggregate it, anonymize it, and then use it to create targeted solutions for all digital channels for studios. So everything that a studio does to market, they use Movio's data to determine who they're going to market to. They use Movio data to measure whether it worked. And we're very close to being at a point where Movio becomes the currency that is used in the between media agencies and studios for all marketing. And I think when we reach that point, we've kind of reached this place where we're indispensable and probably got a really, really large long-term future in the space. So that, in a nutshell, sort of basically our story. I'm sure there's lots more I could tell you, but I thought what I'd go through really is run through what it was as far as our learnings along the way that probably allowed us to succeed, a few sort of key points. So the first one was have a clear vision. And I think, that's cliche as hell, but we did, and then we did it, and then we did, right? So we had this idea, we then got sidetracked by Air New Zealand, we then came back to the clear vision. And when you stick with that clear vision, and it's the thing you can tell every person that comes to work with you, it's the thing you can tell every person that you meet, it's every client that you meet about what your vision is for the industry, and you keep that narrative going the whole way, you start to believe your own bullshit. You really do. And you start to get really fired up about it. And as soon as it's diluted, or you've got too many strands or too many elements to it, and the story takes too long to tell, and the elevator pitch becomes impossible to do in the elevator, you've got your vision messed up. And I think that's probably the first and most key piece of advice, is to refine down your strategy to a very clear vision, and focus on something that is potentially might feel like quite a small problem. Solving the data problem for cinema exhibitors probably doesn't feel like the biggest data problem in the whole wide world to solve. But if I went wider and I said my role is going to be, I'm going to create a CRM loyalty solution that is going to be able to analyze data and then do targeted email marketing and measure results in all retail, I'm now competing with Salesforce, Oracle, IBM Marketing Cloud, all these other things which have billions of dollars in R&D, have got the brand recognition that I don't have. I'm not going to be able to compete. But if I focus on the cinema vertical, and I am an expert in movies, I understand the movie industry as well as any of my customers, I hire experts in that industry, I hire data scientists that study the data in that industry, and I become more than just the software. I become intangible as well, because I have that voodoo that they don't understand. If I can have that added service element to the product I've got, it's very, very hard for an Oracle or an IBM, who are our logical competitors, to dislodge us. They'll look at the situation, and the only way they'll get into this vertical is by buying us. And they might look at it on a big scale and say, that's too small a vertical for us, I'm not interested. So it's a really key thing as a New Zealand company, in my view, to pick a niche and then pick the niche within the niche. Because I think if you don't, you're struggling because you're going to be fighting against too many companies. That if your pitch is too wide, and I won't name names, but there's some big New Zealand tech companies with some really high profiles that have tried to bite off too big a problem and they're starting to fall over. And those that pick the very, very small problem that completely own them, I think Vista are a good example of this. Vista have 68% market share globally in cinema point of sale, and probably most of you had never heard of them. Right, Orion Healthcare. I don't know what their global market share is, but they have an ERP system that's designed for public health sector. Incredibly boring, very niche. No one else is probably going to bother building it, but they completely own that sector. Probably the widest one is Rod Jury's Xero. They've got a very targeted SME product for small business accounting, right? Okay, it does a little bit more than that, but these companies that focus on these individual problems are the ones in New Zealand that tend to do the best, because as soon as we try and go wide, we don't have the resource, we don't have the manpower, we can't get the people, we can't get the capital at the rate that can be done in other territories. So I think that real focus is where New Zealand companies succeed, and laser focus almost. I think the next thing is being really agile. New Zealanders are naturally really agile. We're jack of all trades, master of none, is all of us, right? All of us think we can do it ourselves. Whenever we see somebody else's product, somebody else's business, we think, I can do that. That's pretty easy. I remember doing the HRV days, the number of people I'd knock on the door that were garage engineers that would say, we can build a fan and a filter and a controller and put it on the roof, and actually heaps of them did after we did the presentation to them. So, that was New Zealanders. I think it's a problem in some ways that we don't get specialists to do the jobs that they're good at, but in other ways it allows us to move very quickly towards opportunities. So I think one of the things you've got to do in New Zealand, or in any entrepreneur, is fail really quickly. So be agile and fail as fast as you can, and just accept the fact that the first 1, 2, 3 in particular years, but possibly more, you're going to just keep pivoting. You're still going to have the vision, that ain't going to change, but how you get there is going to go like this. It's never going to be a straight line. And I think those that are really pig-headed about the direction they're going in actually struggle. They've got to make sure that they are always moving and with the ebbs and flow of the market and following an agile strategy. And if I look at the products that we've launched, Movieo Cinema is largely a BI tool now, right? It's got heaps of reporting. If you want to analyse anything about the film sector, what's the breakdown of popcorn versus Coca-Cola for customers who go on Tuesdays, that's the kind of question that customers solve in our product. When we released Movieo Cinema, it had no reporting in it. Our reports were built by our customers' requirements. So we went out with the product. We actually had it sold into the territory. They were able to find a target group and send a campaign, but there was zero reporting in it. All of that evolved and grew over time. There was no return on investment calculation. There was no control groups. All this stuff came from learnings along the way from customers, because we didn't go out with a product that we ever thought was anywhere near finished. We very much went out with the minimum viable product, the minimum I could get away with selling, because I knew that there was going to be changes. And no matter how smart I was, they were always going to change the product on me. So if I was able to change quickly, I was able to get them to buy into the product. So if a customer said to me, I'd really love this product if it had a report that did this, I'd check it with the rest of the sector to see if that report was valid and it wasn't just them, and then I'd create it. And all of a sudden they now feel like they own a piece of Movio. And I think that's one thing we've done very well, is let all our customers feel like they own a piece of Movio. And so we have never lost a client in the world, anywhere we've worked. And I think a lot of that is to do with that piece. In saying that, we never do anything custom or bespoke. Ever. Ever, ever, ever. If it's not something that's going to suit the masses, we won't do it. Because as soon as you do something that's custom or bespoke for a customer, you've now got to maintain whatever that custom or bespoke thing might be. And you cannot continue to scale if you've got all these individual things that you've done for customers. You need a singular product that you can keep selling en masse. So whenever we created a customization, we would always do it in a way that would serve all of our customers and not just the one customer that we were dealing with at the time. And a lot of Kiwi companies have got themselves unstuck, particularly some of the older tech companies, and I can point to Orion and Vista in this group, having to have done a lot of customizations for customers, which have massively slowed down their evolution of the product, because every time they iterate or change it, they have to go back and fix all these little connection points that they do for each customer. Movio is one product sold to all customers, not many, many products that are customized. And I think that's really, really key if you ever want to scale. Otherwise, you'll end up having a scenario where you have more staff than customers. And that's never a good scenario when you're trying to make money. So I think the next thing is find a perfect partner. If you're going to grow really, really quickly, partnering up in the Xero ecosystem has proven very successful for a number of New Zealand companies. Find something that Xero don't do that fits in their ecosystem and tie yourself to it. Find something that Salesforce do, partner with them and build an app that fits in their world. Find something that Oracle do and fill a hole. I met one guy this guy's sold 3 companies to Microsoft, 3 in a row. What he does, you will never have heard him, he's from Taranaki, he's worth about $100 million, he lives in Silicon Valley, and he does this each time. Works inside a company like Microsoft, sees where their holes are, goes off on his own, builds a product, courts them from the start to buy that product, never takes the product to market, and then sells it because Microsoft look at it and go, it's actually better I buy it than R&D it myself. And he doesn't sell it for a lot. He sells it for between $10 and $30 million each time. So it falls under the radar of New Zealand media. And then he has to do like an 18-month earn-out to make sure he delivers the product, and then he does it again. So he just looks for holes inside these businesses, and he just fills them over and over again. So he's found these perfect partners, and he fills a hole for that perfect partner. And I think that's a really fast way of becoming very successful in this country, is riding on the coattails of somebody who's already got it worked out. I think, we've got a great example in Xero down here, but there are others. And so trying to find those is a really good thing to do. Offer the intangible. I mentioned it earlier on. So that expertise of being a movie expert, I'm pretty confident I could run a cinema or a distribution company as well as any of the guys that currently do, because I'm so attuned and so akin with that industry. I know it like the back of my hand. I go to every convention. I meet with these guys every single day. I know the problems. I know what they're facing. I know everything about that industry. I don't know much else, but I know everything about that industry, and I make it my duty to know everything about that industry. And I think knowing everything about the vertical you're in and being able to converse at the level that the execs can in that industry plays into that place of dark art, that bit where another startup can't beat me because they don't have that intangible knowledge. And adding to that, when we invested in data science, what we were able to do is take the big data problem that I mentioned at the start of my speech. We were able to take that big data problem and do something with it and make it real. Because I think a lot of people were getting frustrated with all this big data talk, but what does it mean and how do you use it? And so what we were able to do is provide tangible advice, tangible actions based on doctorates of data science that gave them this sort of really algorithms and math that they couldn't understand. So even if they could copy our software, they couldn't quite work out how did we get to these insights. And I think creating that intangible service level that you can offer over and above a product makes it almost impossible to get dislodged, and you're not always having to get into a price fight then. You can start calling yourself a premium provider, and it's not about discounting anymore. And if you're finding yourself in a commodity battle because you're price fighting with somebody, that's a really great way to avoid it, is invest in the dark art. I said before, productize, never do anything custom. Focus on the niche within the niche. And then I suppose for us, what is next? In our view, we're just getting started. I know that again is pretty cliche, but we've just hit this point where Movio itself's got 60 staff. I don't know how many have got 60 staff in here, but I've been here once or twice before in previous businesses. And for whatever reason around this number, all of your systems and processes become challenged, and you start getting to a point where everything becomes difficult, and if your strategy isn't 100% clear, it becomes very, very hard to grow, and alignment across your company, which was easy with 5 to 10 people, becomes really, really hard. And middle management so often run off in their own direction and do things, and hierarchy becomes important. You want it to have a flat structure, but you can't. And so I think we're in this stage of starting again. We've got all of our company in New Zealand next week. We're rewriting our one-page strategic plan. We're realigning our entire KPIs across the entire company and rewriting them. Our vision is going to stay the same, but we're having it's almost starting again. And I think that's another thing that's really important, which is making sure that you have a one-page strategic plan that you can clearly articulate to every single person that walks in the door, because what you'll find as you grow is that alignment becomes really challenging, and then scale becomes challenging. And so our goal from here is we're at 12 million. As I said, 2021 we think we'll be at $100 million, and hopefully become an iconic New Zealand company that lasts through the ages and doesn't sell out to an American, but I can't promise that last bit. So that's us. I suppose just questions. anything you wanted to ask and go through?
Just one from the outset here, Will, when you were talking about going to Las Vegas and you hired a suite.
Yeah.
Tasneem wants to know, how do you get busy, time-poor people to meet you in a suite, given your experiences? What would you say?
Yeah, that's a really good question. How do we get busy, time-poor people to do it? I think you have to have a compelling pitch to start with, right? So there has to be something you've sent them or got in front of them that is going to make them interested, and you need somebody who's going to introduce you. So, and that didn't always happen, but somehow you have to get a phone call in front of them where you get a 5-second chance to pitch them, or somebody who they know or trust provides a warm introduction to them so you can actually get them there. That's the first thing. The second thing is, if you have a suite and you are at the convention that they're already at, and and you've done something interesting, I think people do tend to want to take those meetings at these events. They don't want to come and meet you on the trade floor. They don't want to meet you at the coffee shop. So I think if you put the effort into that, I think it does make a difference. What we've now found is that the suite that we actually lease 2 suites at CinemaCon. Each suite's 330 square metres, so it's 660 square metres of suite space. We have the nicest suites at Caesar's Palace when we go now. We don't spend any money on the whole event at all, so the trade organisers hate us because we don't spend $1 on their trade show at all, because it's a waste of time. But we focus all our energy on getting CEOs to want to hang out with us, because they're the guys that make decisions. So we have the nicest suite. When they come in, we've got people serving them drinks, we've got people serving them food, we give them a Movio t-shirt when they walk out the door, they get a little stick with all of our latest software on it, and all these bits and pieces. We host a private party up there. I mean, all these things that are going to appeal a lot more to that group of people with big egos. If they just said, I've just come from it's actually the Rain Man suite. Have you ever watched the film Rain Man where they're dancing? That's the suite we leased. When you do that, it gives a lot more wow. Now, if you compare that room each of them cost $5,000 a night. The trade floor for a shitty stand cost me $8,000 a day. So it's less than the trade stand, and I don't have one, to do. So I think as a strategy, there's sort of multiple components to it, but I'm really particular about how that's set up. I have my EA comes up with me. If I didn't have an EA, I'd hire one. I have people hired that come to the parties because it's always a male imbalance at these things. I don't know if you know the cinema industry, it's 99% male, so you go to a party, it's not a lot of fun. So you have to hire lots of people to come, promo people to come in to make it look more normal. It's all these little things that you've got to do to try and really wow and not look like this tiny little New Zealand company that's doing it that's bootstrapping all the time, and they don't know it's the only thing I spend money on all year, but for them they probably think we're just this massive conglomerate, which we really are not. So,
questions from the floor. Just raise your hand if you've got a question you want to fire away. Yes, sir.
Are you doing any work with Netflix?
We're seen as sometimes we're described as the Netflix for the theatrical business. So, and we often position ourselves that way, where we sort of give the theatrical businesses the data that the Netflix have enjoyed for some time. We're not doing any direct work with them at this stage, although we are working very much with the other side of the conversation. So all of the studios and the distributors, when they're negotiating the rights for the content that they sell on Netflix, they need to understand the value of their content, and what we help them with is understanding the value of their content, so that when they're sitting with the Netflix, who know very well what it's worth, and don't tell anyone, they are in complete control. So there is a component, but not directly for Netflix. Good question, though.
Yes.
Yeah, when you said you initially started discussing with Vista,
yep.
When you went into those initial discussions, how did you romance them into coming on board with you without giving them your ideas? Without them going out the door and saying, holy shit, this is great, these characters?
Yeah, that's a really good question. My business partner is far more pessimistic than I am, and he was very concerned they were going to steal our ideas. And I guess that was a real fear. I think a lot of New Zealanders have a huge fear that other Kiwis are going to steal their ideas and run with them, because we're all quite good at making shit. And I think there's some truth in that too. But we were concerned, and we were genuinely concerned. We made them sign a pretty airtight NDA, which of course they didn't want to sign because they didn't know whether they may have already been building some of these things and didn't want to preclude themselves from it. So it was a very awkward situation. But I think we got ourselves to a point where we realised that there was a lot more to gain than to lose. And we also looked at their software suite and realised that they were light years from where we were. So they had probably a 3-year build to catch up to what we'd done. and we were a long way ahead. So I think that played into their hands a little bit. I know it's not a great answer, but it's a difficult one. We were concerned about it. When we looked at what their software suite was, we were different. We were very consumer-facing. They were very back-end. We thought that they were going to struggle to catch up. I think we convinced them they were going to struggle to catch up. A couple of their tech guys thought they could do it themselves already. But I think the other advantage we had is that Hoyts at the time had bought that Barclay Cinemas, and Hoyts' sales had collapsed after they bought Barclay because we were no longer running this targeted marketing strategy. So there was a lot of pressure, and they were a Vista customer. There was a lot of pressure from them to work with us as well. So it was it's a difficult one. But with these partners, you need to sort of have a little bit of blind faith. The one thing I've learned about the US is they're not like New Zealand. The US people would sooner buy you than do it themselves. They always get a proper person to do it. You know, even in their own jobs. This is my job. I don't do anything outside of my job. This is my job. And it took me a while to get confidence that if I showed an American something that they weren't going to rip me off, they really won't rip me off. They might in Silicon Valley, but by and large, our clients have no inclination at all of trying to build what we do. So I think you've got to sometimes just go, I can be paranoid all the time, but I'm probably not going to grow, or I'm going to have to just, do the best I can to protect myself and then show a little bit of blind faith that not everyone's bad. So, Summer.
There was a question up here. Yes.
Just interested to hear a little bit more about, capital raising. Some of the things you've done, to get cash in the door. Is it all from, the great business you had originally, just a little bit of profits you made in the coupons, right at the start that have funded the next venture, or
a little bit.
Just some of those challenges you've overcome, and how you've raised capital along the way.
Yeah, capital's a funny one. I've always run businesses that have never borrowed money from anybody else, rightly or wrongly. We could have grown Movio faster had we taken capital. So I think in hindsight, I would have taken on capital to do it. I was quite adverse to losing control. I was, a child of the recession, I think, if you like, because I had a couple of businesses during that time that were going very, very well, and capital markets dried up and we really needed it. And I knew I had to learn how to run a business that made its own profit and turned its own cash over. So I still was running through that in my head when I entered this space. Capital raising was a new venture for me, and it's got a lot of thorns and a lot of hooks in it. But I think the first thing is you need to be in a situation where you're in control of your capital raising. I think it was the first thing I learned a long time ago, in that you can't be in a situation where you need the money. So I think the time to capital raise is when you don't need the money, because as soon as you need it, you're going to take bad money. I think that's a really, really key point about capital raising. Lots of people wait till they go, I'll get to this point, and then I'm going to do a capital raise. But by that point, if you don't get it in a few weeks' time, you're dead. Or a few months' time, and all of a sudden those VCs or angels, as they're called, which is a funny name for them sometimes, they're going to look at taking advantage of the fact that those terms aren't quite favourable. So I think that's a challenging piece. I think raising capital, we first went up to Silicon Valley to do our capital raise. So I'll just tell you a little bit about our capital raise story. So we got to a point where we knew we needed to raise cash, maybe 3 years ago. We were break even, but we wanted to grow quickly. I went to Silicon Valley because that's what I was told to do. So I went up there and I met with all the VCs and did all those bits and pieces. There was plenty of interest. The term sheets came. It was all very interesting. But I happened to go to the Kiwi landing pad while I was up there, and it was during the America's Cup. And all of the big Kiwi entrepreneurs, Phil McCall, all these sort of guys were all in there, and I got talking to them and Stephen Tyndall and all these different people, and it turned out there was a really buoyant capital market for great startups in New Zealand. And in fact, the term sheets were better. I was going to get to work with Kiwis. I didn't have to move my headquarter, my business in the US. And so I flew back and immediately started engaging on those meetings and found that there was just as much capital, far better people to work with, far more likely to help you. Okay, they might not open the doors that the US might, but I didn't have to give away my company to do it. So I think there was a lot of options down here if you're at the right stage to see them. So I think we were at the right stage. When we finally got to a point where we were just about to sign one of those deals, Vista came to us and said, actually, we're going to do a capital raise too, but we're thinking of going public. And if we did it together, then, you're the sexy startup and we're the long-established, profitable tech firm. Put the two together and this could be a beautiful marriage. And so from there, it was all about IPOing. And I think IPOing is there's some big negatives to IPOing. You get a lot of cash, you get a big valuation, that's the positives. Your stock's liquid, that's great. The downside is you are under the microscope all the time. Everything you do is got to be documented. Every deal that you make or lose has got to be documented. But the other part to it is when you tell them what you're going to do, you can't change. So, and I talked about being agile, I talked about being nimble. It's very hard to be agile and nimble and publicly listed. Those things don't actually add up together. So I think my learnings in that there is I probably wouldn't have done that again, despite the fact it's been nice to have money. Yeah.
Questions?
Yes. Tell us a little more about your database and how that sort of looks and how you've built a sort of proprietary system to obviously do the EDMs and all
Some technology stack here? Or?
Yeah, and a little bit more about the strategies of how you're growing that and building insights around it.
Oh, I'm probably going to get a little geeky, so I'll try and keep it as least geeky as I possibly can. We operate a model where we use squads. Our squads own segments of our company. So effectively, we've got seven squads. Each of our products broken into 7 microservices, and each service belongs to, it's almost like a startup. So you can imagine a team of developers is like a startup in a business incubator, and they own the mandate for that piece of the product. And that whole thing is theirs. They completely own it. Now, we tell them what goes into the roadmap, but how they do it is up to them. So that's the first thing. There's a lot of ownership. Second thing is we use microservices, so it's not one massive code base we're building on top of it. It's like a platform, and there's services that sit off to the side that are independent of the core platform. So that allows us to grow quite quickly. We use automated testing throughout the whole business, so that allows us to add new developers, and when they build something, it automatically creates a test, which can go back and test where in the code is it broken. So instead of them having to understand what came before them, there's a testing process that automates the testing. So that's sort of some of our principles behind the scenes. From a databasing perspective, we've learnt a lot, thanks to Callahan, who funded us to the tune of about $1.8 million early on a major project to work with a database technology called Cassandra. Has any of you guys ever heard of that before? It's a design for unstructured data, right? We won't get into it. At the time, there was virtually no one in the world doing it. There was no one in New Zealand doing it. There was one consultant, I think, down here. And we were the pioneers, and the idea was that if we created this Cassandra cluster, that other companies could then use it, and Callahan wanted us to build it and then learn from it and then open it up to other New Zealand businesses, which we were totally fine with. That was a complete disaster, and it basically taught us what not to do. So we adopted a completely different structure, which was having basically a SQL database that sits at the top, and then a different data structure underneath depending on the application. Because what we found with big data is that some things suited a MongoDB style thing, some things suited an InfiniDB, some things suited an unstructured thing like NoSQL, but there was never one thing that fitted everything. And I think that's one of the things with big data. You have to kind of use the right tool for the job. I mean, it's almost like a builder. You've got to pick the right tool for whatever it is you actually got to do. You can't just use a hammer for everything. And so we actually have this model where we have this singular SQL thing, but each of the different applications has a different data structure depending on what the problem is we're trying to solve. From a technology perspective, one of the things that we've been big on is being a school. So we run Scala down under in New Zealand, which is the coding language we use. So we are the sort of the leaders in Scala in Australasia. We host people every weekend for code retreats at our office. And this is not our people, this is any people, that we don't charge for it. And it's about giving back what we're learning. And so we do a lot of sharing of information, but that actually plays really well into recruitment, because lots of people want to work with us because we're very leading edge on our tech stack and our structures. So I think that has played really well in a market where it's very hard to recruit. We don't have any challenges. So I don't know if that's a bit of insight into our tech.
Yeah.
Just going back to niche, how would you go about, or I'd be interested to hear your thoughts a little bit more on the being agile and all that in regards to a niche market where there's a vacuum that you anticipate a lot of players in that area in the future, but that aren't in yet. How would you dominate in that niche quickly?
Yeah, that does make sense. I think get into market very, very fast with a product quickly and start co-developing it with a beta customer. So you need a beta customer, somebody who's going to work with you and give you feedback, a friendly customer. You might even give them the software for that period of time, and they almost co-develop it with you. So that means you're getting market intel in real time, and you're developing at 100 mile an hour against the requirements that one customer is providing you. So I think that's probably the first thing. And the second thing is trying to add some form of service or intangible element that isn't just software coding. Because if it's just about the code that you're writing, somebody will copy it, right? But if you're adding some intangible to it on top of that, data science, insight generation, algorithms that you've created, something that sits on the side, expertise that you have that others don't, that becomes something that will stave off the competition for quite a while. And the last thing I'd say is stick to one thing, because you can't be agile and iterate if you're doing 5 things. Stick to one thing.
Where do you see yourself in 10 years?
That's a really, really interesting question. Probably giving back to the tech sector. I think I've travelled my ass off in the last few years, so the idea of getting on another plane soon is becoming terrifying. So I think, I want to see this through to the 100 million target that I've got in my head for the company, and that would take us to well over $1 billion valuation for a New Zealand tech firm. And that's without Vista. Vista will be long past that at that point. So I think that's my immediate goal, and then from there it's probably look to liquidate out and then start to help New Zealand companies do what we did. I think the way that we want to do it is almost create a model, and not just, it's not about money, but more about the strategy of how that somebody can go from concept to execution in a global stage, and how our model worked. And so we'd look for businesses that are in a niche that have got a similar sort of thought pattern to how we worked. Probably put together a team of guys that are experts in data science and technology and product strategy and marketing, and just try and build this sort of ecosystem that we can help out businesses grow globally.
Well, it's fantastic, Will. Here is a little gesture of appreciation for your time this morning.
Thank you very much. Awesome.
And let's hear it for Will Palmer.
Thank you.
And all the very best with the onward progress of Movio conquering the world. I think you've got, 74% to go, have you?
Yeah, 74%. Well, that's just in cinema space. We've got
That's
lots more to
cinema
do.
space, yeah.
The studios have got lots of money we can spend.
Fantastic. It's an extraordinary story. Thank you very much,
Thank
Will.
you very much.
Now, just before we wrap up, and you are very welcome to have a chat to Will straight after I've burbled here for a minute, just a reminder that we've got one more event at 5:30, and if you're keen to learn more about branding, we will be joined by Tracy Lee, who will be sharing some very valuable wisdom all about defining your brand, maybe refining it, maybe having to radically reinvent it. She will be along at 5:30, and if you haven't registered for that event, it's not too late. Just use that Movio site to do so. And as I promised I would mention, once again at these events, we've got a feedback function on that Movio site. Spark have offered a little bit of a carrot for your feedback today. A $250 credit will be given to someone in the audience who provides feedback about the Spark Lab events. Now, you may want to critique the session with Will, or maybe one of the earlier sessions you've been to. We'd be very keen to get your responses. Upfront, honest, straight shooting, good, bad or otherwise. So, for example, if you'd like to see more Spark Lab events in Christchurch, what sort of topics do you think we should be tackling? What sort of speakers have you got in mind that you think would be worthwhile having here? So please feel free to give us your feedback. It will be enormously appreciated by Spark, and you will be in to win that $250 credit. Thank you very much once again to Will Palmer, and thank you so much for joining us this morning. Have a great day. Thanks.